So how's it going, my comic chat armor? We're back again with Jason Douglas to talk about his new Kickstarter, Jane American.
Right.
Yeah, and it funded in what'd you say, 4 days?
Yeah, 4 days, and that is. I mean, I'm surprised. I'm grateful. I'm a little overwhelmed. Like I honestly, and I don't know when this is going out, but we're recording this on the Sunday after it funded on on Friday, and I still haven't been able to soak it up yet because I was teaching all day that day. I did 2 live interviews that night, and then I just did my first free comic book day signing all day on Saturday. And then I just hung because I'm still a normal human being. I just hung blinds in my house all day today, literally like 10, 11 hours of it. And then I jumped on here with you. So it hasn't quite soaked in yet. It hasn't quite sunk in. I'm still a little bit overwhelmed, but yeah, it's very, very exciting. And that's going with, man, it's my first one. I didn't know how it was going to go. Like if you told me that I was going to be scrambling and calling in a favor from a friend from college to get the last dollar on the last day of May, I would have believed you. That could have been the way it went. Instead, it's been 4 days, and that's pretty good for the type of book we've got and the kind of campaign that we're running. And now we're working on stretch goals, right?
Mm-hmm. How did was this your first free comic book day also?
Well, I mean, it was my first one where I'm a guest at a store doing a signing. Yeah, because you and I have talked about this before, but that first run of Parallel back when you and I both first talked, I mean, that thing that dropped, that got published right into lockdown, right? So every signing that I had lined up in that first year of it and every con, those all got canceled. So it was really doing the interview circuit for those 18 months to get that book to sell out and get the 2 Ringo nominations. And so now, I got to do some cons towards the end of that. But now that the Parallel Special Edition is out there in the world, I mean, that's what I'm going around, and that's what I'm at cons and I'm at signings and things like that, cross promoting Jane at the same time.
Okay. When did the special edition drop?
Let's see. Was it in previews in January? And then I think the shipping was delayed a little bit, so it dropped mid-April. It was in comic shops and Barnes and Noble and in mid-April, and you can get it through. I mean, you can still get it through SourcePoint Press, but you can get it through Amazon. You can get it through Barnes and Noble. You can get it through. It's published by Simon and Schuster as well, so it's in book. You can get it in any bookstore as well, and they can pre-order it for you. Yeah. Or pre-order it, order it for you. It's out there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to my comic shop. Thought I asked them to get that for me.
Yeah.
So
pretty cool. It's legit. 50 bonus pages. The Ringo stamps on there. Cool new cover. Annotated script pages, annotated concept art, and afterwards it kind of talks through that whole atypical story about how this thing got published. A new 10-page story diving back between the panels of the original story that I know you guys loved so much. Mm-hmm. A lot of cool extra features back there that I curated this past summer.
Nice. So Jane American, do you want to give them the elevator pitch in case?
Sure, absolutely. Oh yeah. Well, I'll give you that, and I'll give you more. I mean, I like to talk. So what we're looking at here is, my first Kickstarter, and Jane is a 32-page one-shot, full-color comic book. Okay, introducing us to Jane's world and really exploring the deeper themes of identity, gender, self-worth in a small-town American setting during and post World War II. Okay, hints of beloved stories like Superman for All Seasons, Archie 1941. Here's what I'm going to promise you, and anybody who backs this book and ends up with a physical copy in their hands. I will promise you that across these 32 pages, it's going to break your heart. It's going to make you cheer, and it's going to shock you with a cliffhanger ending that will have you begging for more. Thus, I'm teasing the big fat book that follows this, okay? What we're looking at here is a young protagonist, a coming-of-age story. Jane, when we see her in the present day in 1946, she's lived a life with more than enough responsibility for a young person coming of age in this time in America, okay? But family tragedy, a bit of trauma, has basically changed her in ways, and in unbelievable ways. I'm going to give you a code word here, and I'm not going to give away the entire premise of the book, but I'm going to give you a code word that you will recognize if you're a comic fan at all. Ordinary people who can do extraordinary things, okay? Some trauma has triggered that, and that stuff is better left hidden in the society. And yet, the economic hardships after World War II, right? If dad's not coming home from the war and mom can no longer be a Rosie because gender roles revert back to pre-war, status quo, those hardships kind of left her with a choice. She can stay safe, she can stay hidden, or she can embrace who she really is for the sake of everyone that she loves. Jane's going to have a lot of big decisions to make this, to apply what she can do and who she is, or to keep it hidden, which is probably the safer choice. For anybody familiar with my work, you're probably noticing, oh my God, forgive me for saying this, a parallel to parallel. Structurally, thematically, they're very different. Tone, they're very different. Obviously, one's contemporary and one's a period piece, but structurally, they're almost identical. The kind of story that I like, and the kind of story that I like to write, is one where you are taking a comic book nerd wrapping paper, okay? Something that everybody can enjoy. An entry point for somebody, if you just love comics as escapism, I'm going to write a book for you, right? Parallel is that dark sci-fi twisted tale, but at its core, it's really about the existential dread of time passing and dreams deferred and that kind of crisis that we all go through, right? You and I have talked about this on this very show. Your wife and I have talked about this on this very show. Well, Jane's the same thing. The wrapping paper that is very accessible to comic fans, again, I'm not giving it away, but an ordinary person that can do extraordinary things. I'm not going to say that code word because I want you to be like, I wanted to blow you away on that last splash page panel of this one shot. But it's really about these themes that everybody can relate to, right? A parent, an adult, a peer, a teacher, society in general telling you that who you are isn't right because it's not what is accepted at that time, right? Which is why this story is so personal to me, okay? It's inspired by and named after my late grandmother, who fought against, not entirely successfully, being put in the box of societal norms in post-World War II America, just like Jane was, okay? There's family names throughout this book. Most of the characters are named after, not necessarily based on, but named after like all these people of my grandparents and my great-grandparents' generation who made it through the Depression just to fight a war, just to come back to the status quo, no matter how much they advanced during those war years, okay? The story takes place in Plymouth, Michigan, the town that I grew up in, the town that my grandfather came back from World War II to and raised his family in. And in real historical locations, okay? But I think most importantly, what I want people to know is the story's not just named after my grandmother and inspired by her, it's dedicated pretty much to two people or two groups of people. One, to my now late grandfather, who just a few weeks ago, before he passed away, made it to 99 years old in a month and lived an extraordinary life. And honestly, I'm telling you right now, man, one of his, as he was declining in the last year of his life, one of his biggest pleasures was knowing how hard I was working on this book and that his high school sweetheart's name was going to see print in the world. So he got to, like, the script was like by his bedside for the last like half a year. Every time Annie Wright, my amazing interior artist, a 21-year-old first-time comic book artist phenom from Indiana, every time a new Annie page would come in, I'd either show it to him or send it to him, depending on where he was, and he would cry. The last things that he actually got to see were the two exclusive covers by two amazing comic book artists that are on the Kickstarter. You can only get on the Kickstarter. Malia Ewart, who is fresh off of her stint as a DreamWorks animation animator and is now working for SourcePoint, for Garrett Gunn, making a couple of comic books and doing Good Boy covers. And then you probably know him. Even if you don't know him, you know him. Sina Grace did a cover for me. Sina Grace, who used to run Skybound for Kirkman and was the editor on The Walking Dead for years, and then went off to do a bunch of indie books for Image himself, and then a little book book called X-Men and wrote 18 issues of Iceman and is now doing Superman. He did a pretty cool cover. Maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. But like my grandfather got to see those covers, and those are the last things, and he was just overwhelmed with gratitude. The only thing that kind of breaks my heart a little bit is that he did not live quite long enough to see us hit that. We got funded on Friday, and that would have, I think, it hurts me a little bit that he didn't get to see that, but I know that he knows. And then the other group of people that this book is dedicated to, and this is the one that this is the one that I get a little bit emotional about, because as you know, my day job is not this. My day job is a public school teacher, right, for the last 23 years. And this book is quite literally dedicated to every single student who has gone through my classroom the last 23 years, who is still to this day in the 21st century struggling with those same themes of identity and acceptance and self-worth and self-fulfillment, right? And it breaks my heart that this is still the same issue that my grandmother dealt with, right? Huge step forward during World War II. As soon as the boys came back from the war, she's back in the kitchen. And like back to the status quo, and the fact that there were people who looked at her and said, no, you can't do this because you're a woman, or, you know, insert any group, insert anything about yourself where somebody else has told you that's not okay. Insert that here. And kids are still going through the exact same thing today. So like to have my antagonist or my protagonist, my main character, be a 15-year-old coming of age in post-World War II America, where that was about as powerful of a restricting force as you get, I think is a pretty relatable message no matter who you are today.
Oh, yeah. That's cool that your grandfather got to see it, and it's cool that he lived to 99. I'm sorry that he passed.
Well, I mean, like, look, like, you know, when you lose somebody you care about, it is always sad. But like, I don't want you to think of it as a joke, but like the dude lived to 99 years old, a month and a week, and he got to go in his sleep. That's pretty good. Oh, that is pretty good. We should all be so lucky, you know. Lived a very full life, did a lot of amazing things. And I'm sad that he's not here today, but I'm really happy that he got to see what he got to see, knowing that his name's going to see print, his high school sweetheart, my grandmother's name is going to see print, and this thing is going to exist in the world.
Is he in the book anywhere as a character?
Yeah, so you will, like, I'll just give you the inside scoop. Like, there's two characters that have, Jane's little brother has got his first name, Gene. Okay, so like when you see little baby Gene and you see little toddler Gene in the book, as we do our flashbacks and move forward to 46, you'll see him, and that's his first name. And then the manager at the plant that a lot of this takes place in, at the factory, has got his last name Overholt, and is actually, Annie did a wicked good job capturing his likeness when he was in about his mid-50s. So like when the rest of my family opens up this book in, you know, a couple of months, and they see Mr. Overholt at the factory, they're going to see their dad or their grandfather or their great-grandfather, you know, that kind of thing. And that's going to be really exciting for people. And it's kind of funny. So I got to tell you this. So the factory that, you know, a lot of this story takes place at this place called Wall Wire, which is an actual historical factory in Plymouth, Michigan, that during World War II got a war contract. Because if you think about southeastern Michigan during the war, you've got GM and you've got Ford here. And all those giant plants right outside of Detroit all got turned into, like, they're making tanks and bombers, right? Well, they grabbed up all the little factories in like the small towns in outside of Detroit as well, and gave them war contracts. And Wall Wire was a place that I think it came into fruition in like the 1920s and was doing wire, you know, electrical wire. And then they got turned into this place that made Marsden mats. And even if you don't know that, you know what it is, because these are these long sheets of metal that got holes punched in them that the Army Air Corps used and the Navy used to make temporary runways all across the Pacific and Europe. So you could just basically build a runway wherever you want instead of having to capture one or build a permanent one. And so Wall Wire got converted to a Marsden mat factory, and actually my great-grandfather worked in that factory during World War II when his daughter, my grandmother, was off doing, do you know, like, have you ever seen in the movies or in the cartoons, like the telephone operators where they're taking the cords and they're plugging it into the different things? That was her. And then my grandfather's off in Europe fighting World War II. And so a lot of the story takes place in that actual factory. And the best part about that is, so during the research phase of this book, and I did some research, dude. Like if you look at the shared Google Drive that the creative team has on this, like I know it's all bits and boops and electronic code and whatever, but if you tried to lift the research folder, you would break your back. It is so full of the most minuscule details because I'm not going to get called out on having the wrong icebox in the corner or the wrong truck going down the road on the wrong year. It's all like, it is exhaustively researched. But the best part was my grandfather and I, a couple of years ago, when he was still mobile, he was about 97, and we went out and we found wall wire. It was still standing. We found the guy who had just bought it, and we got a tour, literally, check this out, literally the week before they tore it down and segmented into office space. And what that meant was they had stripped out most of the second half of the 20th century, all the stuff in there. So what we were seeing was those original fixtures, the original walls, the original conveyor belts that carried the Marsden mats down, and I got footage and photographs of all of it. So anytime, like when you back this project, if you're a history nerd, you can rest assured that when you're flipping the page and you see Annie's art of the inside of this factory, when Annie's welding, when people are giving her a hard time, when she's having to make some decisions about who she is, every single angle, every single thing you see, machinery, it's all real. It's exactly the way it was in the 1940s, much less 1946, when this story's taking place.
Okay.
And it was really cool because my grandfather got to be there for that. You know, he's walking into this place and he's traveling back in time to where his father-in-law worked while he was off in Europe. You know what I mean? And where this story is going to take place. And he was there with me for that, and that means the world to me.
I mean, did y'all get to see him tear it down?
No, I saw them. I mean, what I saw was they had torn out all the inside, so it was on the original stuff. I mean, none of the modern stuff was there anymore. So like you could see. Like in the book, you will see where the punch clock is on the wall. You know, the old tiny punch clocks where the workers would go in and give their card when they come in and come out. You could see the shadow of where that was on the wall. So I know where that stuff, like all that stuff. Now I didn't like sit around and go back a week later and watch them tear it down or anything. No, that wouldn't have been very useful. But like seeing that inside before it was torn down was pretty magical.
So how did you find the people to do your covers? I forgot his name. You just said it.
So Sina Grace and Malia.
Yes.
Sina, I've known for a long time, and this is a lesson in networking for everybody who, like me, has spent most of your life as a fan, and then at some point you get off your butt and try to be a creator. So Sina was somebody I met just at a convention like 12 years ago. And so I'm at like a couple conventions, and we just stayed in touch, and like we connected and we bonded in those few times we saw each other, and just have been in touch ever since. He was actually a huge piece of. He was very supportive when I was writing Parallel, and I had questions, and he was somebody with a couple other creators that I had met that I went to for that, and we just, every once in a while, like somebody drops an email to somebody else, kind of thing, just, like long distance friends who stay in touch, talk like once every 6 months or whatever, and we got to the point where we're trying to find the right cover artist for this and stuff, and Malia we found because she was actually in contention to be one of the interior artists early on, and then she went off to work for DreamWorks, like I mentioned, and then came back from that, and through my editor, Dr. Christy Blanche, who is an amazing human being, she knows Malia, so she set me up with her, and then I emailed Sina and was like, was there any way you would want to do this, thinking there's no way he could, because dude is big time, and they both said yes, and now we've got these killer covers that you've got to go over right now. Like pause and go over to www.kickstarter.com, search Jane America, and just take a look, because the Malia cover, it's got Norman Rockwell vibes. It's got Rosie the Riveter vibes. It's gorgeous, and it's coming in 3 different versions. You've got the standard version, okay, which you can only get on Kickstarter. I think it's gorgeous. A lot of people are backing at that level. Because I'm a comic book nerd from the 90s, we do have a chromium version of that cover, just like Bloodshot Zero, or Bloodshot Zero, Bloodshot 1, and Exo Manowar Zero and Shadow Man Zero, all those great Valiant, and then Marvel got it on the game too, and I love those. We've got one of those, and then we do have one more version, that Malia cover, and this one you got to be careful. I don't know when you're putting this up, when you're going to be posting this, and people can see it, but there's only going to be a couple days left, because my only tier on the Kickstarter that is not only limited in number, like how many copies I'm going to print, but also limited on time, and this thing will disappear on May 17th, is a textless virgin variant of that cover, and it is stunning. It's gonna be gone, and then nobody else can get them. And so those are the 3 of those. And then Cena did this cover that you got to go check out. It's amazing. So it already looks very old-timey. It's a bit of if you are a deep comic nerd, you're going to know what it's a kind of subtle homage to. I'm not going to give it away. I'll let people do their own research. But it's a pretty powerful cover. And Jane and her Rosie the Riveter mother are on it. And then what we did with it is we had Dave Lentz, my letterer and designer, who's brilliant in his own right. He aged it, right? He turned it into a vintage variant. And so you get that look that you got on Jeff Lemire's Black Hammer in 1945. It looks like an old comic book. You can see, spine ticks and cover creases and some staining on it like that. But of course, it's just, all digital. And that's cool. And that's awesome. And I love those covers. But I wanted to take it a step further. Look, a story for everybody, but you got to appease the collectors too, right? So what we did with this vintage cover is we're putting it through a printing process called the soft touch laminate, okay? And what that means is it's going to feel old too. It's like this weird suede feel on it. You can't see it, but when you touch it, it's now going to look like an old comic, and it's going to feel like an old comic. And in fact, we named it the Granddad's Attic variant because it's going to feel like it's been in your grandparents' attic since 1945. And yet, you'll send it into CGC, and you're still going to get a 9.8. And that's pretty cool.
Is there anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, listen. Going to Kickstarter and backing Jane American not only would mean the world to me personally, but it's really important to support indie creators, okay? And you and I have talked about this on the show before, right? In comic books, which are probably the most malleable medium out there, they do things that film does, they do things that prose do, they do something that neither of them can do. It's a very unique and very shapeable medium. Well, indie comics are the most malleable of the most malleable medium, right? Because there's no editorial mandate for the last 80 years about what can and cannot happen with your characters and what kind of stories you can or cannot tell. But the difference is there isn't also a huge infrastructure backing them. Every indie comic that you read, especially small press ones or even self-published ones, are living and dying based on your support or you ignoring it, right? And that's what makes up the backbone of our comic industry. It's like 90% of comics are self-funded and small indie publishers. If you want to keep seeing those stories, you got to back them. You got to support them, okay? Now, in the case of my campaign, I'm a public school teacher. I make, oh boy, here's some sarcasm. I'm a public school teacher. I make 12 cents a day. I'm going to be fine. But the book doesn't exist unless you back it, right? Now, we've hit our goal. So what's important? Stretch goals. Now, there are people out there who make their living on, now that we're over our goal, this is how I'm going to put food on my table and clothes on my back. For me, I'm not taking, you can go and read the transparency piece on my Kickstarter page. I'm not taking a penny of this. It's all going to my artist, my letter, fulfillment, the printing, all of that stuff. Dr. Christie, the editor, every single penny is accounted for. None of it comes to me. Even in the stretch goals, which there's some pretty cool ones on there. You got to go check them out. Every dollar we go over our goal, none of that comes to me either. here's what my promises on the page and my promises to you here on the air. Every dollar we go over our goal is going to be dedicated and put towards defraying the cost of the 120-page graphic novel that comes after this about Jane, the full expanded story. So what that means is my heart is not about the money. It's about getting the story that I care about, getting the story that's dedicated to family members past and present and kids past and present out into the world. Okay. And I want every dollar we go over to make it even more reasonable and affordable to get the bigger book out to you in, 6 months to a year. So head on over there, take a look. I mean, it's not a sob story. We don't need to talk about the fact that I'm fighting colon cancer right now. We don't need to talk about the fact that, this book, like, it would break my heart if it doesn't get to this point. But forget all that. Go over there because you like comics, and there's some wicked cool covers to check out and some awesome add-ons and
What? You mean you haven't subscribed to Comicchatauthority?
Oh, come on. Subscribe already. What are you waiting for? It's no big deal.
Like, man, don't forget to tell him to hit that like button.
Yeah, that too. Just subscribe.